We couldn't be more thrilled that we have the speakers that we have coming up next. Snap is our official social media partner, and we're also lucky enough to have their head of news, who's going to talk about fake news, misinformation on the day before this historic moment. Before he gets started, I want to introduce Chloe Wixom. She's the head of group product marketing at Snap, and she's going to give you a little bit of background before we get started.
Thanks so much, Rob, and hi, everyone. Thank you for having us today. So before we get into the meat of the panel, the main event, if you will, I'm just going to give a quick overview of really how we've structured Snap as a platform to be both fundamentally different from traditional social media, and really how we use that architecture to combat misinformation and disinformation, particularly during this important time. To start off, Snap was created as a tool to help people feel inherently comfortable expressing themselves. From that very beginning, we focused on helping real friends connect when they're apart. We were deliberately built differently from traditional social media to allow for users to really feel free to be themselves and make that much safer for our community by offering no public comments, likes, or shares. We designed Snap in this way to provide an inherent sense of safety, privacy, and agency over one's voice, which is something that we believe is essential to empowering self-expression. And all of this, of course, ladders up to our core mission, which is to encourage creativity and learning while making sure Snapchatters can use our services safely. So when we talk about ways that we've actually taken steps to build a platform that ladders up to these values, Discover is really a shining example of exactly what we've done. Instead of offering an open news feed that might optimize for unvetted, sensational, or even toxic content, we built a curated platform. Similar to a television network, Snap chooses which shows run in Discover, and that curation provides you with news and content from trusted voices, one of which you'll hear from in just a minute directly. And when it comes to user-generated content overall, we've built a platform founded on relationships with those closest to Snapchatters, removing those incentives like comments, public likes that might encourage bad actors to try and spread misinformation deliberately. We also really feel responsible to make sure that when our advertisers are coming in and joining the conversation with our Snapchatters, that they have a way to do so that feels safe. It's a full screen experience. There are no comments, no shares, no likes. And all of this ladders up to an actively engaged community that's focused on positivity, entertainment, and of course, freedom of expression. At Snap, we really believe that there's no more powerful form of expression than a vote. We're very proud to have helped over 1 million Snapchatters register to do so during this election cycle. And so with that, I will kick it back over to my friend and colleague, David Roeder, to introduce the rest of our incredible panel. And I hope that all of you enjoy it.
My name is Dave Roeder. I lead our global brands and agency team here at Snap, and I couldn't be more thrilled with this group that we have today. We've got Keely from Group M, we've got Yale from Publicis, and we've got our very own Peter Hamby from Snap. And we only got about 20 minutes, so we're gonna try to get right to it. But before we do, I'd love for each of you to give me a quick intro. Let's go around this room, who you are, what you do, and where you are. And then we'll come back to question number one. Can I kick it over to you, Keely, and then pass it over to Yale, and Yale, you pass it to Peter. Cool?
Sounds great. Keely Taylor, very happy to be joining you today from Hohokus, New Jersey. So the historic event tomorrow is top of mind for me. By day, I look after partners on behalf of Group M.
Hi everyone, Yale Cohen. I lead digital standards for Publicis Media, coming to you live from Jersey City, and looking forward to speaking on the panel. Peter?
Hey, thanks guys. Yeah, my name is Peter Hamby, head of news at Snap, the host of Good Luck America on Snapchat, which is Snapchat's first ever show. It is our political show. We're ramping up for a big night tomorrow. I am also a contributing writer for Vanity Fair, where I write about media and politics. And before Snap, I worked at CNN for 10 years as a national political reporter.
Awesome, Peter. So I'm going to stay with you. Let's go right into it. You've got about 2.5 million subscribers that are consuming your content on Snap. What can you tell us about Gen Z and how millennials are consuming news content? What are some of the trends that you're seeing right now from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, the main trend, again, this is me having spent 10 years at CNN and then working at Snap for the last 5 years. totally different audiences. When I left CNN, the average age viewer, median age viewer rather, was 61. My average viewer is about 19. I think like 75% of our audience is between 13 and 25 or something like that. The trends are, from a content perspective, our audience is like very hopeful and earnest and engaged. I know that sounds corny, but I think a lot of and again, I'm speaking from like a political media perspective here, so forgive me. But, if you spend a lot of time on Twitter, on cable news, reading Politico every day, the political conversation feels very narrow, combative. It's very focused on horse race politics. The audience that I'm speaking to, and I've derived some of this intel from anecdotal evidence, from talking to people that stop me in the street and say, hey, you're the Snapchat guy. I love your show. We also just get feedback from Snap from people who reach out, is that they care a lot about issues. You don't hear a lot about issues on the national news. We talk a lot about climate change, gun violence, the economy, healthcare. And the other thing we found is that they also like to see themselves. I'm in my 30s. I have some gray hair. I might seem a little old for Snap, but they like to see authenticity. I know that sounds like a catchword, but they want to see people who talk to them like they would talk to their friends, which is what I try to do every day when I explain politics. But also they want to see guests on my show who look like them, young people who are involved in politics. This year alone, we've interviewed Joe Biden and Anthony Fauci and Lindsey Graham, Jamie Harrison, all these big name politicians come on our show. And that's great. But we also like to interview people running for mayor, city council, state legislature, who are in their teens and 20s. That's important to us. So, it's a totally different perspective for a totally different audience. And the last thing I would say is that is just time is at a premium. I mean, people's attention spans on Snap, we're competing with texts and snaps and other platforms. And, by making a commitment to being safe and credible and authoritative, quite frankly, and having important guests on the show, that wins out at the end of the day, just like the content, not trying to compete for clickbait, not trying to win an algorithm. We're just trying to bring the most credible, serious news. And in a world that's sort of awash in noise and disinformation, that's actually pretty powerful.
Awesome. Keely, I'm going to go to you and I want to pull out that word authenticity and ask you, what are you seeing as it relates to some of the trends and consumption patterns, specifically by Gen Z and millennials? And how are you thinking about that word authenticity as it relates to where you're recommending your advertisers are investing their money?
Yeah, so we actually just endeavored on some custom research with Snapchat and Group M. And what I was most struck by is that the halo effect for a brand, when it appears in a platform that people deem to be authentic to them, actually is even more powerful. So kind of a 1 + 1 = 3. So we've always known that context was important, but context used to always mean real news. And now we're in this world where it doesn't always mean authentic and real information. And so we're having to go that much more granular about authentic news, authentic to the audience. But the context that Snapchat delivers certainly can be powerful.
Cool. And Yael, coming over to you, I think we can all agree that it's so critical that, that quality journalism, let's call it real news, that journalism continues to get the funding that it deserves, that it needs, frankly. And so when it comes to advertising within news, how are you advising your clients? Like when you think about decisions around suitable inventory for your clients as it comes to brand safety, how are you advising your clients and what are some of the things your clients are looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we've been continuing to advise clients around how to invest into suitable news. So like you said, we put a stake in the ground and said that trusted news sources are brand safe. And part of the reason for that is because by investing in properties that have the budgets to spend on fact checking their stories, creating the right opinions, and starting to put forth the right advertising opportunities, we're actually steering money away and defunding misinformation. So it's an opportunity for us to enter into the conversation. If clients have certain types of adjacencies that they want to try to avoid, we've been advocating that through minimal use of keyword lists in terms of how they use their controls, but certainly use the third parties to really try to manage the sensitive subjects, to really try to invest more in a sophisticated manner, and not necessarily avoid certain areas just because there's challenges. And I think this year has shown, a great tenacity from, where advertisers need to start to lean in. And so I think it's a good opportunity to be present within trusted news, and to support where needed to actually defund other places of misinformation.
And if I could just chime in, that's a great point that Yael was making. The other thing that's important for a brand or an advertiser to remember is that all of these different places you could buy inventory from are not monolithic. So if you do have a level of conservatism, don't write off with a big red pen the entirety of a platform. There are places that have more human interest news where big topics are important to just about everybody. And there are places that have full screen ad units where you're not embedded in any kind of content. So kind of not taking a really broad stroke about the types of places that you wouldn't appear is another way in which you can continue to, through direct action, fund prominent and credible news sources.
Cool. Thank you, Keely. Peter, for you, you've got a lot of advertisers and agencies that are listening into this right now, and they're thinking about advertising in and around news. What do you want them to know as a producer, as a host of a show on Snap?
I think Keely just touched on this. I'm going to give you an example. Over the summer, when the BLM protests happened, their ratings went up on most cable news channels. They went up a lot on my show. Again, we have like 2.5 million subscribers. Almost all of them are watching almost every day for that month. And it wasn't because they were interested in looking at people protesting or things on fire or the political conflict. It's because, maybe I'm being naive, but they see my show as a way to understand the world and to get involved. And quite frankly, I think they see Snapchat that way. I mean, there's a lot of people just at home, especially during COVID, and Snap is their window into the world. And we've been very deliberate about the partners we've let on to the platform. The Washington Post and NBC News, Wall Street Journal are also all covering the election and the social justice movements going on. But again, as Keely said, if you're not interested in being adjacent to the actual news, we have so many other publishers on the platform who are bouncing off of that and talking about, how to get involved, how to register to vote. Here's what this issue means to you. And they might not be showing like Trump or Biden talking about something. They might not be showing an actual protest, but all of our partners, all of our publishers understand that our specific audience of Gen Z viewers is a very hopeful, earnest, optimistic generation that wants to be involved and that cares about the world in a non-cynical way. So, again, if you're not interested in advertising against news, there are other sort of news adjacent properties on the platform that are, will welcome you with open arms. I mean, people are really tuning in this year to follow what's happening in the world and follow these big issues. Unlike previous elections, when it's been turned out. I mean, youth turnout this election is in early vote is at least 3, 4, 5x what it was in 2016. And that's a signal that, this generation cares and isn't running away from big, scary topics. They want to dive in.
Yeah, let's stay with you for a second. So you've got this award-winning news show on Snap, Good Luck America. If you're not watching it out there, please tune in and check it out. You've become a super trusted source for your 2.5 million subscribers. Do you feel a responsibility to be bipartisan in your coverage? And are you calling out fake news on your show? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, one, I think from my very earliest conversations with Evan Spiegel, the values of Snap were, even before Discover came along, like I joined before Discover, were apparent. He wanted to be a place where there could be trusted information for an up and coming generation. And those values from the early days have led us to a place where the vision's been borne out. So there's that. We call out fake news all the time. I think our North Star, our point of view, if anything, is to call out BS, to cut through the noise that everyone sees on their phones all day long, that they see on TV. And sort of like the Daily at the New York Times, we started before the Daily, but our goal has always to be, we're going to hang on to one big topic every day and try to give you some context around it and something to hang on to while you're getting all these signals all day from all these different sources. In terms of being bipartisan, sure, but Jon Stewart famously talked about this back in the day. I think seeing the world through the lens of partisanship is the wrong way to look at it. I think we just try to be fair, to present the best obtainable version of the truth. As Woodward used to say, that is our goal here. The truth doesn't lie between two partisan poles. It is, what journalists deem to be true by gathering information from a variety of sources. And I will say a goal, though, is to puncture a little bit the ideological bubbles that we all live in, that these algorithms have forced us into. We have interviewed Steve Bannon and Chris Christie and Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, and we have spent time at conservative conferences like CPAC and Turning Point, and we cover progressive movement as well. Our goal is to show our viewers at least viewpoints that are different from their own, because we believe that a healthy, political system, a healthy information ecosystem means being able to at least see and talk to each other, because, the farther we get pulled away from each other on our screens, the less we understand each other and the less likely we are to have a healthy conversation. So I lean all the way in on trying to get out of LA, where I am, certainly get out of New York and DC, and spend a lot of time out in the country. We travel constantly talking to just regular people of a certain age, and introducing those viewpoints to folks who might not come across them in their daily lives, and certainly in their current feeds.
Cool. Thank you, Peter. For Keely or Yale, maybe we'll go to Yale. We'll go to you first. Tomorrow is a bit of a news day. I'm curious from how you're advising your clients in terms of like where they're showing up today, tomorrow, and are we staying away from coverage? Is this inventory so valuable because the attention's so high that we're steering advertisers towards it? Like, how are you thinking about not just tomorrow, but the next few days into few weeks, et cetera?
Yeah, I think this whole year has been a fascinating year for news, right? As Peter said, you had Black Lives Matter movement, you have COVID. There's a number of events happening that have really hit hard on the consumer. We're very lucky to be able to work from home and come to, virtually. But there's a whole, youth population who's not working. And we need to be mindful of that. And so we've been certainly advocating in your creative, in your messaging, to make sure that you're absolutely being sensitive to that. I think that's the number one thing that we can advocate for our clients. Some clients are going to have different hesitancies in terms of their adjacencies. There were a ton of riots throughout the year, and so there's been a news cycle that has gone on this roller coaster. And, we've continued to advocate for becoming more responsible with your media, with interjecting some of your own brand values in your media investment decisions, and taking this, with strides. I think if you're pausing certain places, you need to take a lens of what you want to support as a brand. And, our whole mission is to, from the work that I've done with the forays in APB and with GARM, and in working with organizations like the Global Disinformation Index, it's how do we defund places with misinformation, and that's how you invest responsibly into places you trust. Trusted news sources, platforms that have taken into account into their algorithm how to, not share certain types of content with others when they deem it to be misinformation. So I think it's a combination. There's no one silver bullet here ahead of tomorrow. But I don't think that tomorrow is going to be the end of some of the news cycles. So, it's that continued responsibility. How do you create, working with third parties to help support, fact checking? How do you create the opportunity for your advertiser to show up in the right brand suitable and safe environments?
Keely?
Yeah, so share a lot of the same sentiments as Yale, especially with respect to GARM. If we all collectively in the industry raise the floor, advertisers and the general discourse that we all live in our feeds is going to be that much better. In terms of thinking about this from a global perspective, obviously Snap has reach in other markets as well. News doesn't end. There could be natural disasters, there could be contentious elections, there could be human rights issues. So really what we've been working to do is evolve the definition around brand suitability being on a spectrum to encapsulate what are some of these other things that a brand may wish to take a stance on, whether that be from a tone perspective, whether it be from an investment perspective, but really just understanding where is that line. And for many multinational advertisers, it's really important to understand that if you do set a precedent and a line in the sand, but you only apply it selectively in some markets and not others, that there will be broader discussion and dialogue about why was it that Black lives mattered, but other lives in other localities didn't. And not to say that they don't. However, the World Wide Web is very interconnected. And so as these brands are taking decisions to be authentic to causes and to their values, it makes sense to take a step back, to be a little bit more measured and figure out what is a way in which they can stand for those values in a moment of a lot of focus and attention and in those quieter moments between the big news stories.
Cool. Are we better? This came up earlier in a panel, but would you say we're better prepared to deal with this today than we were even 7 or 8 months ago?
I think we have a lot more tools at our disposal. Will we ever be great? I think we have to keep working and trying, especially as the commercial incentive remains for those who wish to spread misinformation.
Cool. Thank you, Keely. All right, we are up against the last couple of maybe a couple of minutes. I'm going to close, Peter, with you, and it's a little bit of a broad question, but we're coming up on tomorrow. You've got a show. What can we expect to see on Good Luck America tomorrow, the day after? What are you looking forward to telling your audience?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, we believe that our audience is not watching traditional news sources. So we have to be, pretty credible and serious on election night. The main thing we're trying to get through, and we've done this on today's show, we're doing it tomorrow morning. We are covering the election all through tomorrow night into the overnight, and we have studio time reserved for the next 2 weeks to make clear that because of mail-in voting, because of early voting, and a variety of states not being able to count those ballots until the polls close, that this is election week. That is a message that has been getting out there in the mainstream press, but we really want to stress to people on our show that we might have some very strong signals tomorrow night based on some state returns that count their ballots early, but counting the results is going to take time, that this has happened before, that you should listen to trusted media organizations, including several of the ones that publish on Snap, and secretaries of state that certify these votes before you listen to any politician running in the race. So we are being cautious, like any news organization. And part of that is having worked at CNN for 10 years and been in control rooms on election night and sort of know how this process works. We aren't going to rush to any kind of narrative. So, caution is the name of the game for us over the next few days for sure.
Awesome. So caution, election week. I love the younger generation voting and vote at 3X, the 4X, the 5X. That's incredible. Authenticity and how that matters. Guys, thank you. I'm Akili, Yale, the work you're both doing alongside all of the clients and agencies that are invested in the 4As and GARM and the other organizations that frankly are having this and driving this conversation. Rob, thank you for putting on this event and the amount of effort you're bringing to it. And of course, Peter, thank you for continuing to host this incredible show, the work you're doing with Vanity Fair, continuing to push this generation to do what they're doing. It's just awesome.